Hello, hello, Liberation Hour. This is your host, Comrade Felicity, coming at you pre-recorded. Yes, I know I've been doing so many pre-recordings recently, but I have to say this is in part because of my work schedule. A little tidbit about me: I work at a convenience store. We had someone quit. And so naturally, we're all at 6 days a week right now. So at the time that if you're listening to this live, I'm asleep right now. I am recording this Wednesday morning-ish. Well, I guess it's kind of afternoon because it's 12:30. But either way, hi everyone. I am so excited to be back on the show. I will hopefully be back live next week. We're going back to normal, thank God. So I will hopefully be back live. But in the case that I'm not, we'll continue to do these pre-recordings. But I would like to be back in the studio, as that is where I feel the most at home. So, folks, welcome back to the show. Let's go ahead and start with the top of the hour disclaimer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We've got some interesting stories today. A lot of crazy stuff is happening in the world right now. We got to talk about it. So, WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign online community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not meant to represent WRFU UCIMC. Folks, welcome back to the show. I think that more than anything, first I want to talk about Cuba. I want to talk about what's going on in Cuba. I also want to talk about Iran briefly, as there's been some rumblings of possible war, which of course I'm not excited for, as I'm sure everybody else is not excited for. I would prefer that we don't go to war, but alas, these things are not always our decision. So, nervous laugh. So, let's go ahead. Oh, and then the last story I want to discuss today is the shooter in Rhode Island. Mainly, I not even want to just discuss the actual, I don't know, like the actual, like the shooting itself. I really want to discuss the media coverage around it, because this has been a crazy story. I think that there's so much to talk about here. And so, let's go ahead and get started with Cuba. As you all probably know, things are heating up a lot with Cuba. We have basically completely economically cut them off from the world. There is, I believe, humanitarian aid from a Freedom Flotilla that is going to Cuba, although I don't know what the timeline is on that, but they're trying to bring rations and food and everything to help out the Cuban economy and the Cuban people. And I think that it's pretty, all things considered, Cuba has been in dire circumstances before. Their people are very resilient. But this is barbaric by the United States government. This is a barbaric move, and this is a move that is meant to essentially that is meant to try to suffocate Cuba. That's what they're trying to do. They want to suffocate them because they're one of the last strongholds of anti-imperialism, and they successfully threw off the American beast, which is a feat in and of itself. And they have been successfully being independent from the United States for many decades now. But this economic blockade comes at a time where, there's already heightened problems, geopolitical problems with the United States and Iran, the United States and China, Russia, of course, and in Venezuela. Throwing Cuba into the mix, I'm not entirely surprised, especially because we have Marco Rubio up in there. This is unsurprising to me, but at the same time, it's very concerning how aggressive and draconian the United States is being with this, just by virtue of the fact that they've completely cut off their energy, which is their access to gas and oil from Venezuela and from Mexico. This is incredibly, incredibly dire. Because, I believe at this point they've probably already run out of fuel. And here's the thing, Cuba was already running off of very low access to fuel. Cuba has been running off of low access to so many different resources for many decades now, because the United States, since the Cuban Revolution, has in fact been, trying to keep them from having access to, resources. There's been a blockade. There's been an embargo, sanctions, all of the things that the United States does to countries that it doesn't like. This has especially been true against the United States and Iran, which of course we're going to get to. But as it relates to Cuba, I do want to kind of go over something that I find to be pretty important and an aspect that this is kind of like a domino effect, because when you keep resources like this from people, especially people who are already in a circumstance which their resources are already very tight, we also, other issues become exacerbated. And Cuba has, for example, what we're going to be discussing here is the trash piles in Havana, as U.S. oil chokehold halts garbage trucks. This is from Reuters. This was written February 16th. And I think that it's incredibly important to discuss, because this can lead to things like worse health outcomes. Now, Cuba has put in a lot of money and a lot of time into maintaining their infrastructure and kind of shoring up things like medical care through funding these programs heavily subsidizing them through the state to ensure that they have good medical care, that to make sure that they have good access to resources for the people, which is why the Cuban state has been around for so long. A lot of American statesmen and people in the American government try to claim that the Cuban government is so oppressive and blah, 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 which, like, sure, no, actually, no. They're just wrong. They're just wrong. I think that it's very obvious that they have been wrong, especially considering that, the people absolutely, an island of 9 million people could absolutely overthrow the Cuban government if they wanted to, if they were angry enough, especially because the United States is chomping at the bit to support some kind of right-wing insurrection. But the people are being largely taken care of. Are conditions amazing? No, we need to be realistic about this. But I mean, we also have to be realistic in the sense that the Cuban government is not some monstrous entity that is the United States government. This has been confirmed. We know this already. This is how imperialism works. And so, I think this, the demonization of the Cuban government is one of the most frustrating things to me. It's just incredibly sparse, and a lot of there's not a lot that they really can complain about, because all of the problems that the Cuban government has, or at least most of them, are exacerbated or caused specifically by the United States and its economic and what its economic ambitions are. And so let's go ahead and get to the article. I just want to read this and kind of discuss what the implications are for this. So Havana, February 16th, Reuters. Garbage has begun to pile up on street corners in the Cuban capital of Havana, attracting hordes of flies and reeking of rotten food, and one of the most visible impacts of the U.S. bid to prevent oil from reaching the Caribbean's largest island. State-run news outlet Cuba Debate reported this month that only 44 of Havana's 106 rubbish trucks were able to keep operating due to fuel shortages, slowing garbage collection. Cardboard boxes, used bags, plastic bottles, and rags have piled up on the street corners across the seafront capital as some residents sorted through the waste looking for scraps that they could reuse, while motorists, pedestrians, and bikers are forced to circumvent the imposing heaps. It's all over the city, said Jose Ramon Cruz, a local resident. It's been more than 10 days since a garbage truck came. In other towns on the island, home to around 11 million people, never mind, not 9 million, 11 million. Residents took to social media to warn of the risks of public health. Cuba's communist government has implemented rationing measures to protect essential services in a country that was already suffering from severe shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. Once again, this is not the fault of the Cuban government. This is entirely the fault of the United States empire that has been, once again, restricting them completely from the international market, making it so that they can trying to suffocate them economically. They have been trying to do this for decades. This is not a new policy, and this is not a new outcome. The national oil supply has fallen off dramatically in 2 months. Venezuela, once Cuba's top supplier, effectively stopped sending shipments in mid-December. Mexico's government also said it was halting shipments after Washington threatened tariffs against the countries that send supplies to Cuba. A Russian newspaper last week reported that Russia was preparing to send crude and fuel cargoes to Cuba in the near future without giving a specific date. The U.S. has maintained an embargo on Cuba since 1960, but in recent months, President Donald Trump's administration has hardened its stance, sanctioning vessels shipping oil to the island and threatening tariffs on suppliers. Once again, this is economic terrorism, guys. The U.S. administration argues the measures will increase pressure for political change in Cuba. No, it won't. It will simply starve people to death. It will simply starve people to death. The United Nations has long voted for the U.S. to end its embargo, and leaders from Mexico and Venezuela said blocking fuel could have serious humanitarian consequences. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is, quote, very concerned about the situation. His spokesperson, Stephanie Dujarric, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Stephanie, told reporters on Monday, adding that UN teams were working with the Cuban government to help support humanitarian relief efforts. Quote, the Secretary General would like to see all parties pursue dialogue and respect for international law, yet again, he said. Okay, so I need to just go on this little rant real fast. International law. International law is not a real thing. International law does not exist in the way that especially very liberal-minded people think that it exists. International law exists insofar as imperial countries allow it to. International law does not exist in the ways in which they do not find it useful to their end, or to their goals, or to what they're trying to or attempting to do. I've had family members try to make this argument to me that, we had to go to freaking Iraq because, we had treaties and blah, blah, blah. No, that is not at all accurate. That is not accurate whatsoever. The United States government and imperial countries like it that have come before it, that will come after it, and that exist now, they do not respect international law because you cannot hold a country using nukes accountable. Countries without nukes cannot hold countries with nukes. And let's just say, expand that to countries with massive arsenals and armies who are able to also covertly go into countries that oppose them and topple their governments. You don't say, this is a basic principle in political science that, I was taught when I was like a freshman in college with some of my first political science professors. Countries with nukes it just exist in a completely different stratosphere. The reason being is because, think about it from this perspective, resource-wise. I'm a materialist and I'm a realist. We have to look at this with clear eyes. Politics is about two things. It's about resources and violence. Who gets them and who gets to do this? Who gets to do the violence? The United States has a monopoly on violence currently internationally, especially because, let's be real, the United States is the only country to have dropped a nuclear bomb on people, 2 civilian locations. The United States did that. And it did that not only to flex its muscles to the USSR, but also to show the rest of the world that it's willing to. That if you cross the United States, that it is willing to drop the bomb on you. And this isn't even talking about the fact that the United States always planned to drop the bomb on Japan. The plan was never to really drop the bomb on Germany, especially because, that would have consequences that the United States really didn't want to deal with. And it was also dropping the bomb on a group of people that the United States doesn't believe deserves to be bombed. It was a lot easier for the United States to bomb Japanese people because they're not white. And that is how imperialist white supremacy works. It's a lot easier for countries like the United States to terrorize them in such a way because they see them as second-class citizens internationally. And so when I'm talking about the situation in Cuba and international law, these things exist only as far as empire allows them to exist. International law only exists insofar as the empire finds it useful for its ends. International law does not... Here's the thing. If international law was actually taken seriously, Israel would have been dissolved decades ago. Decades ago, because Israel has been violating international law for decades. By the standards of international law, the Palestinians have a right to resist. They have a right to resist occupiers. They have a right to resist genocide. And this has not been the sentiment that has been that major countries have that are involved in the genocide. These are not the rules that have been followed. In fact, it has been the exact opposite. And so anybody that tries to say international law is actually a serious thing does not understand international law and does not understand how politics actually functions. What are the actual implications? And so this takes me over to Iran. There's a lot of news currently. I'm seeing from some of the channels that I'm in that report on happenings within the talks that are happening between Iran and the United States, that there might end up being an escalation of a full-on attack by the United States against Iran. This would be unsurprising. This is often how the United States does things. It sucks, but I think that we need to remain, I would say, level-headed and clear-headed in what this is, which is imperial aggression. I am not a supporter of the Ayatollah or the theocracy, obviously. I've talked about this in the episode on Iran, and I still got comments from people who were like, "Your beautiful Iranian theocracy it's falling, you dirty communists," and it's like, come on, man. Anyway, so this AP article written by Jamie Keaton and Stephanie Lichtenstein on February 17th is called Iran says it's temporarily closed the Strait of Hormuz as it held more indirect talks with the United States. Iran announced the temporary closure of the Strait of Hormuz on Tuesday for live fire drills in a rare show of force as its negotiators held another round of indirect talks with the United States over the Islamic Republic's disputed nuclear program. It was the first time Iran has announced the closure of the key international waterway through which 20% of the world's oil passes since the U.S. began threatening Iran and rushing military assets to the region. It was not immediately clear if the strait has been closed, but such a rare and perhaps unprecedented move could further escalate tensions that threaten to ignite another war in the Middle East. As the talks began, Iran state media announced that Iranian forces had fired live missiles into the strait and would close it for several hours for, quote, safety and maritime concerns. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, meanwhile, warned that, quote, the strongest army in the world might sometimes receive such a slap that it cannot get back on its feet. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to be real. I don't know about that one, Chief. Iran's foreign minister later adopted a different tone, expressing optimism about the talks and said, quote, a new window has opened for reaching an agreement. Quote, we are hopeful that negotiations will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interests of relevant parties and the broader region. Abbas Arangagchi, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, told a UN disarmament conference after leading the Iranian delegation at the talks held in Geneva. He added that Iran, quote, remains fully prepared to defend itself against any threat or act of aggression, and that the consequences of any attack on Iran would not be confined to its borders. He made no specific mention of the military drills or the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. President Donald Trump, who scrapped an earlier nuclear agreement with Iran during his first term, has repeatedly threatened to use force to compel Iran to agree to constrain its nuclear program. Iran has said it would respond with an attack of its own. Trump has also threatened Iran over the killing of protesters. Okay, so let's kind of unpack this real fast. First of all, the only reason that the United States is allowed to do this to Iran is because Iran does not have nuclear weapons. I have said this before, to friends and family alike. Well, mainly friends, because my family would not agree with this. But I'm of the position that if we're going to keep this international order, which of course I don't agree with, then Iran deserves to have nukes because this situation, Iran needs nukes. There's a reason. Okay, here's the thing. I'm going to kind of use North Korea as a foil for this. The United States has certainly attempted, most likely attempted multiple times to try to basically go after North Korea, its leadership, its government, and destabilize it and overthrow it. This is not new. This is often something that the United States does repeatedly. But why do I bring up North Korea? Well, North Korea is a case where, and I'm not a Jucheist. I should mention, I am not a Jucheist. I would like to do actually an episode on North Korea at some point. They are such an interesting case. Highly recommend listening to the Blowback season 3 on Korea. There's such a wealth of knowledge, especially about the Korean War. That is what the season is about. Anyway, the reason I bring up North Korea is because North Korea is a nuclear armed country. What makes that a special or significant thing? Well, I just talked about this, but what makes this so significant is there's a difference in the way that empires and imperial forces treat countries armed with nuclear weapons versus countries not armed with nuclear weapons. Why is this? Because having nuclear weapons puts you in a different international class from those who don't. I'll use 2 more examples: Libya and Syria, Gaddafi and Assad. Both of them were overthrown by the United States imperial apparatus, along with most likely United States intelligence through the CIA. Part of the reason that this is because they were both opponents of the United States imperial desires. And I should say, not even really completely. I'm not an expert on Syria or Libya. I know I have enough tangential knowledge, but I would say definitely Rev Left Radio, actually, he's got some good content on Syria and what's going on there. But what I will say is both of those countries were so incredibly destabilized by the United States and imperial aggression. And a lot of this was due to the fact that they could not really defend themselves against something like this. They didn't have the ability to, because they didn't have nuclear weapons. And it's not just nuclear weapons. They didn't have they didn't have a formidable enough military presence that the United States felt as though it had to take other routes to kind of subvert that those issues. The United States knew that it is just a more powerful country. It can simply overpower these folks. And so where does North Korea fit into this? Why am I bringing up all of these other cases in relation to Iran? Well, North Korea is armed to the teeth. It's kind of like Albania under Hoxha. There's a reason. They have very good reason. And it's because of the fact that the United States has shown what it is willing to do. If you don't know about what happened in the Korean War, again, listen to Blowback. But what happened during the Korean War is so, they were bombed so badly. They were decimated, completely decimated by the United States empire militarily. And it was so incredibly just harsh. Words can't explain just how badly the United States screwed up North Korea. And so there's also, I think this also kind of adds to the Juche element. But anyway, enough of that. What I'm saying is, by the rules-based order in international, the way that international politics actually plays out, the United States does not historically try to dismantle or destabilize countries that have full access to nuclear weapons. Why? Because that becomes a liability on them. That becomes a situation in which it's mutually assured nuclear destruction. The last thing that the capitalist class does want is to start a nuclear war, because that means everybody's dead. Nuclear war is not necessarily a desired element amongst world leaders. It is always threatened, but it is not necessarily desired. It is very much a what are you going to do about it kind of situation. The United States knows that it cannot, under any circumstances, provoke. There is a line with countries that are nuclear armed. I would like to actually hear other people's perspectives on this, because I tend to take this perspective based off of my own my own education, but I would like to hear other people's how they feel about this international rules-based order, and how it actually functions versus how people think it functions, and how nuclear weapons really play into that. But when I'm talking about Iran, Iran is a country that has been trying to develop nuclear capabilities, not just for energy, but I mean also for weaponry, because it has shown time and time again that countries with nukes are a lot harder to destabilize, because there is that element of just complete and total decimation. And so, we're on the last 5-ish minutes. And so I want to discuss the Rhode Island shooter, not to do a super sharp pivot, but I do find this incredibly important, because of the way mainstream media has been currently reporting on it. If you haven't noticed, if you don't watch the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the Foxes, and if you're woke, essentially what's been happening is a lot of these news outlets are covering the shooter that was in the hockey game ice rink shooter in Rhode Island was a trans woman. What they won't tell you is that she was a Nazi. And you might be wondering, comrade, how do you know? How do you know that this woman was a Nazi? What proof do you have? Well, folks, I highly recommend that you just simply Google search Rhode Island hockey ice rink shooter, and you go to Google Images and try to find a photo of this woman with her bicep. She has quite a large bicep. She obviously works out, in the foreground of the photo, and you will see it. I think it's her left arm. There is a giant totem-cough tattoo. Whoa. Yes, this woman has a giant totem-cough tattooed on her arm. Allegedly, this tattoo occurred before she transitioned, but she has not abstained from her Nazi ideology. And of course, mainstream media will not tell you this, because her being trans is obviously the least interesting part of this whole situation. That's, oh God, it's so incredibly insane. Because, this woman is so clearly a Nazi. She is a Nazi. And, this isn't even being discussed, which is the crazy thing, because, who cares if the shooter's trans? This person is right wing. There's obviously them being trans is not the reason for them to shoot up the hockey game. Also, it's important to note that this woman was trying to target her ex-wife and son. This was clearly an interpersonal problem, an interpersonal violence, an interpersonal situation that resulted in severe violence against a lot of different people. And I think that it's incredibly important to recognize this, because this woman was a Nazi, was clearly extremely mentally ill, had not gotten, and this is what happens when you don't have services for people to be able to access help, to be able to actually have a robust access to medical services, not only actual physical medical services, but psychological services. This is what happens. We continue to have these issues because so many of these mass shooters are not only right wing, are not only on like extreme right wing, are also incredibly mentally ill. And this was obviously a family dispute, but it is so incredibly sad. And it's important to recognize the facts of this situation, which this person was a right winger. Violence from the right wing against civilians and mass shooting events like this are unfortunately not uncommon, and it's something that we need to recognize, and it's something that we need to we need to look at the common denominator here. It is not that she is trans. So few shooters are trans, and thank God Charlie Kirk is dead. Otherwise, he would be running over the horizon with this story. Jesus. Anyway, we are at 30 minutes, folks, and so I'm going to go ahead and get off the air. Yeah, of course, I'm pre-recorded, but I'm going to pretend like I'm in the studio. I'm closing my eyes and I'm manifesting me being in the studio right now. Anyway, so my next segment, the actual meat of the episode, this is on a panel about Marxist parenting. I have so many interesting people on the panel. In the party, we have Comrade John, who is not only a father but a grandfather. Comrade Weston, who is a father of two young girls. One is 2 months old. She was just born back in December. And then we have Comrade Deirdre, who has a 4-year-old daughter, and who explains her experience of being a mother, a trans mother of a daughter. And, so many interesting and extremely important perspectives on how parenting has added to their perspectives as Marxists. And so, folks, I'm going to go ahead and get off the air now. I'll see y'all next week, hopefully live, crossing my fingers. And I'll see y'all later.
Okay, welcome back to the Liberation Hour, folks. This is a panel of Marxist parents. Yes, this episode we are doing, I think, a really fun and interesting format where we have a panel of Marxist parents, 3 parents from the American Party of Labor. We have comrades Deirdre, John, and Weston. And we're going to have some really interesting conversation around Marxist parenting, what that's like, what it's like to be a parent raising a child in these a Marxist parent raising a child in these times. And so there's a lot to discuss here. If you guys want to give yourself a short introduction each, we'll start with Weston and go to John and then Deirdre.
I work in education and I have 2 daughters, 2.5-year-old and almost 2-month-old. And I'm very new to the APL, so I'm excited to hear everyone's perspective and talk on this.
Hello, I'm John, cadre member with the APL over the Colorado Great Plains region. I have a son, he's 20 years old, and a grandson who is 3 years old. So I'm coming from the perspective of a parent and a grandparent. So yes, should be a fun little conversation.
I'm Deirdre. I'm a relatively newer member to the party. I work in medicine or the medical field, and my daughter will be 5 years old in April.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've got a wide range of parents here and a grandparent. Very cool. And so I think the question I want to start out with today is how has becoming a parent, I think, how has that changed your perspective as an individual and as a Marxist? Were you a Marxist when you became a parent, or did you become a Marxist after you became a parent?
I can go first. I was not a Marxist when I became a parent the first time. I would probably class myself maybe as like a progressive liberal, which is unfortunate looking back, but we all go through a process. But actually, my daughter was born 10 weeks early, and just dealing with like the NICU and all the hoops and hassles with the medical field and stuff like definitely radicalized me further. So it and it did change a lot of my perspective just because of the assault on like women's rights and having daughters. So it it definitely pushed me further left as as they got older and even like right when they were born.
I was the same way. I wasn't a Marxist whenever I first became a parent all those years ago. I actually became a Marxist quite recently. I'd say approaching 4 years now. Yeah, because it was around 2022ish in the fall is what I'm. So uh, my son was already like almost grown by the time I became a Marxist, and yeah, I could have been a better father with him growing up and stuff like that. There was the circumstances in which I ended up with full custody of him uh, there for a while, but yeah, I could have done a better job. I had somewhat of a drinking problem there for the longest time, and I just sobering up and just reading and learning about Marxism just it shaped me into what I feel like I could have been, the parent, and I have to look forward to the future and just doing better and being there for him and my grandson and the family that he's raising.
Um, I can't remember if I labeled myself a Marxist. I think the term I probably would have used for myself at the time my child was born was probably anarcho-communist. I've been like some flavor of leftist for the last 10 years, but really didn't consider myself a Marxist or Marxist-Leninist up until last, you know, 3-ish years maybe. So I mean, I was definitely already like a radical when she was born. Um, it, in a way, the biggest thing for me is that something I notice, and I try not to think about it too much, is that it becomes very easy to worry about like before she was born, I worried about my future. You know, I don't really worry about that too much anymore. I more worry about what are things going to be like for her by the time she's my age. And so for me, it has become a great source of fear, um, but also in a weird way, a great source of inspiration because I want to do something and contribute in some way so that by the time she's in her 20s or 30s, um, there's some sort of chance at the world being a better place for her, whether I'm around anymore or not.
Yeah, no, that's those are all, a very broad swath of answers that I think is, it's a really important perspectives to have, especially because everybody comes to Marxism differently. Nobody there's no one right way to do it. And I think that especially becoming a parent can be a radicalizing factor for a lot of folks. Because it's literally bringing new life into this world that, as Deirdre was talking about, it's for a while, you're worrying about yourself, but once this new person comes in, now it's time to worry about them too. And if, in a lot of ways, it becomes more important for folks. And so I think that's, being a parent, the idea of it being inspirational is like a very good way to look at it. But now that you are a Marxist, how has that changed your parenting style and the way that you parent your children, and how has that changed your perspective as a parent and as a grandparent now that you've come to where we are as Marxist Leninists?
I'll go. I guess all my life I was told that no, we can't afford that. I wanted something. No, we can't afford that, and I was never really explained why. It was just like, no, not right now. We just can't afford it. And now it's like I can explain why we can't afford these things, like why capitalism is making it harder and harder for us to afford anything, and just to explain to him that you'll need these tools as you're getting older and growing up and navigating your own life. And I'll tell them I wish I knew half this stuff back when I was your age. Uh, it I could definitely see it as a guiding force for good. Uh, it's helped me out just to understand, like, because I was pretty reactionary there for a while, just like that hustle grind, work, blah blah blah. I gotta work. Boss wants me to hustle, blah blah blah, and I was all about that, and just I never understood class consciousness and stuff like that. So now that I've become better understanding of it, I want to prepare my son to not make the same mistakes and like those same trials and tribulations that I went through, just navigating with no, material concerns or just whatever.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is I was raised very conservatively, so a lot of stuff was very, driven by materialism and stuff and or getting things, and you earn things by working harder than the other person, or just never giving up, the normal capitalist stuff, the propaganda. So just teaching my daughters and myself and our family to value more of um, experiences and traditions and things that aren't around money or materialism, and working towards um, just fostering the togetherness in ourselves that we want to see in the world. So I think that's the main thing I'm going to try to do, and that's been I've been led to from Marxist-Leninism.
One of the things that I know that I'm doing different compared to how my childhood is that, and Weston knows a good chunk about this. I'm pretty open about it in the party, but my mom's always been pretty cool, but my father was pretty far right. He was affiliated with a couple different neo-Nazi groups at one point or another, and I had to unlearn certain things as a child and as an adolescent, and kind of fight my way out of that kind of thinking. And by the time I had hit like 19 or 20 and I was trying to, learn about socialism and all that stuff, it was more difficult than it needed to be because of all of the things I had to trudge my way out of. I remember picking up like a copy of the manifesto, the Communist Manifesto, and having this kind of like light bulb moment in that paragraph where he talks about like society breaking up into, two different sides, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And I had like, it was like this eureka moment where I had finally realized what side I was on. And from there, I wanted to kind of do whatever I could to further my side in like the in its like struggle and all of that. And the big difference that I want to make sure the big thing I want to make sure Raven doesn't have to worry about is that like she won't have to try to figure out what side she's on. She already knows. I'm already pretty open and honest with her about that. She knows she's a working class kid, and we're on the side of the working class. That's not something she'll have to like fight her way through this or that book to try and figure out the truth about.
Yeah, no, that's really that's a very insightful answer, Deirdre. Especially, I appreciate that because I was, as someone who was not raised by Marxists but became Marxist in college. That's my personal journey. I was raised by two probably more lived up parents than anything. They're very like liberal. My mom's more of a rad lib, and my dad's very like institutional Democrat. Um, and I would say that like I said, everybody's journey to Marxism is different, but especially the experience of becoming a parent and everything that comes along with that can be so radicalizing. and especially with our own journeys growing up with our own, because I mean, Comrade John and I had this discussion last episode where he grew up in a very Christian fundamentalist household or a Christian nationalist household that was so like, it can be extremely oppressive. And, it can be extremely hard to get out of that mindset. And then obviously, Deirdre talking about her experience with a neo-Nazi father, and someone who is, at least affiliated with that stuff, that really affects kids, and it really affects their how they perceive the world, and can really warp the way that they see the world. And so, fighting the good fight like you are now is so noble, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure the rest of a lot of the other Marxists in the world and the party especially do as well. Seeing parents who are Marxists and raising their children to be class conscious. What is something I would say, now that you either as a grandparent or as a parent, raising a little one, what has that taught? Has there anything from that experience that's taught you, or made you a better Marxist, do you think, just raising them?
I'm gonna have to think on that for a minute. That's a really good question.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
It's made me more patient for the revolution.
And that's patient with them.
Just more, yeah, I'd say more patient in general. Like I would, again, I can blame the alcohol as much as I want to, but I did have a short fuse and would lose my temper about the silliest things a lot of the times, and now I just like have a dialectical materialist outlook on it. Like, all right, well, what brought you to this, hysterical laughter of, what had just happened, or some kind of like he messed up in school or something like that. And instead of just blowing up at him, I'll just like look at all that. All right, well, let's look at the factors. I'll just kind of like hash out instead of a punishment. You're just like, yeah, you're grounded for 2 weeks or whatever. We'll look at it and we're like, all right, well, here's what you did. It's clear that punishment isn't working. So there was one time he got in trouble in school, and I made him like eat some fermented black duck eggs that I got at the grocery store. I'm like, all right, well, grounding you and like taking away your Xbox isn't working very well. So let's just eat this egg, and the next time you get in trouble, you're gonna eat another one. And I don't think he got in trouble again. So I know I didn't get a call back from the principal's office anytime after that. So it's just creative parenting, I guess. Like
that's so funny. I love that. That's the most creative punishment I have ever heard for someone.
Yeah, I have a video of it on my Facebook. It's funny. He hated it.
I started laughing as soon as you said, have this egg. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell?
Have this egg in these trying times.
Reminds me of that, there's like an old Everybody Loves Raymond episode where Raymond is like by himself with the kids, and because he's a guy, he doesn't know how to handle the kids by himself because it's a 90s sitcom.
Yeah.
And mom's gone. You're right. Mom's gone for like a couple hours, and the kids are like being loud and crazy, and he doesn't know how to handle them, and so he's like, he starts threatening them by like saying he's going to take away their cereal and make them eat like a boring grown-up cereal. And the way he words it, he's like, look at the cereal boxes. You think that you keep acting this way and you get the fun toucan? No, if you keep doing this, you're going to get the two grandmas on a bike. And then like later in the episode, Deborah comes home and the kids are asleep, and Raymond's like sitting at a table like all sad, and she's like, what's wrong? And he's just staring at the table, and he goes, I made them eat the wood.
That's so funny.
I don't know. Growing up, I liked the wood cereal.
You liked it? Oh shit.
Oh yeah, grape nuts and a pile of sugar. Oh, that was the best.
Oh well, it's the pile of sugar probably helped.
Yeah, lots to do with it.
Oh my gosh. I actually, funnily enough, I grew up, my mom never let us eat cereal past the age of 5 for me. Um, I was I was only allowed to eat Honey Nut Cheerios. I was not allowed to eat cereal. And I guess I speak from a different perspective because I'm 22, so I am a recent adult. My mom calls me a baby adult. Um, so I still do vividly remember my childhood. I don't have a lot of adult memories, I guess, quite yet. But when we talk about cereal, like my mom, she's always been kind of strict on what we ate and everything, and I'm the oldest. So by the time, my sister came around, like no cereal in the house. Um, any similar rules?
We we only like what was it? We didn't get to drink anything with caffeine in it, like really any caffeinated pops or anything like that, except for on weekends. That was something my mom was like very particular about, which I guess is probably for the best because it just we weren't drinking a bunch of extra unneeded sugar. And then our family was also vegetarian for several years, so there was like no meat uh, in the house, so that cut down on like I don't know high extra amounts of like sodium and unnecessary fat. We ate a lot of like tofu and beans and a lot of vegetables. So I guess like it wasn't fun. It was healthier physically for me, but I didn't like it a whole lot.
Yeah, I guess I got fairly lucky with my son. The most, I guess, extreme thing that he would do for about, I'd say, a good 4 maybe 5 years. It seems it's probably less than that. It just seems that long. Uh, every day for breakfast before school, and even like on weekends, he would want French toast. And every day I would make him French toast. I would like do different breads and stuff like that, different, uh, egg washes and stuff. But it was just, well, what kind of French toast do you want today? Like, but I'd also have like fruits and sausages and stuff like that. So he was getting like well balanced breakfast stuff like that. And all he would drink was water, like no soda, no like iced tea or anything like that. Just hey, what do you want to drink? Oh, water. Like I think even breakfast he would drink milk or something like that. But yeah, just he's water. Like hell yeah, bro. That's what I'm talking about. Drink that water. Stay hydrated, my friend.
That's such an interesting kid thing because I remember growing up and
Yeah,
always wanting soda, but my mom was
right.
very strict about soda. Like we were not allowed to have soda unless we were at a restaurant.
Yeah, we just couldn't afford it. We drank sweet tea. We were sweet iced tea drinkers because we were from
My dad's
Southeast
a sweet
Texas.
icy. Yep, I
Yeah.
understand that. Um, but yeah, no, that's very funny. Yeah. No, Weston, do you have do you have any similar rules for your littles on what they can and can't eat or that kind of thing? It's a little side
No,
tangent,
we're
but I find it interesting.
we're pretty we kind of let the girls lead the way, but the funny thing is that uh my we all don't like eggs, which is funny, and the foods it seems like me and my wife hate, my daughter loves. So, but she's a pretty healthy kid. We're pretty lucky. I was very picky growing up until probably I was closer to an adult. The weird thing we had growing up was the only time I had regular Coca-Cola was Christmas. So that was always a big deal. I remember that was one of my big points of Christmas. If like if we went to the restaurant, we went to a restaurant or a movie theater, I would have Coke, but otherwise it was at we would have like Kool-Aid almost every night. So I just that was big for us. But my daughter has a big sweet tooth, so we usually have to have something in the house for her for the end of the night. Other than that, she's a pretty balanced eater, so we're pretty lucky.
Yeah, no, and it's funny how kids, like they're all a little different with like, with their food interests actually. Small anecdote for myself. I have two siblings. I'm the oldest. I have a 17-year-old brother and a 10-year-old sister. So we're all pretty spaced out. And again, I'm 22, so you can probably tell. You know, we're all different age groups, but growing up, I was usually I'm still not a picky eater. I'll eat almost anything. I just hate asparagus, and my mom loves cooking asparagus in the summer, so gross. But my brother was always pickier, but not in a way of like he only wanted to eat chicken nuggets. Um, and um, like my brother, he's the kind of kid that like he actually has very good taste. He's got a very good palate, and he just doesn't want to eat crappy food. So he one time was sitting in the car with my mom, and they're sitting there talking, and he goes, "You know what would be really good? It's like a piece of like lightly toasted, like thin bread with like an avocado guacamole spread and like some cooked tilapia on top." And it's just like sitting there talking about this, and it actually does sound really good. But my sister, she's the picky eater. Out of all three of us, she's the pickiest. And she also eats like a bird. She will eat like small bites of her food, but she'll eat small bites of food throughout the day. So that's kind of weird. But yeah. And yeah, John, it looks like you just said something in the chat. What's up?
Oh no, we were just talking about like the age range between our siblings and stuff like
Right.
that. I'm 4 and 16 years older than my two siblings. I guess my parents decided to have another child whenever they finally had insurance. And, like, third time's a charm for a daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's cute.
Growing up with that age gap, like I was raised around, or she was raised around me and stuff like that a lot. So I was able to tap into that younger generation and get sucked into the brain rot that's the YouTube and stuff like that. They, was more inclined for the Gen Z, like the older Gen Z, like younger millennials. And yeah, I was right there in it, in the trenches. So
in the
even though
trenches.
I'm like
Yeah.
way older, I feel like, one of the kids. Like I can relate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's funny. Does anybody else here have siblings? And if so, what's the age range between you guys?
Yeah, I have a younger sister. She is like she's 26 now. And I'm 29, so just a couple years. And then we have a 10-year-old brother.
Oh, whoa, that is a huge age gap.
Yep.
Thought my gap
Wow.
was wide.
Yeah, that's wow. Well,
hmm
nice.
Yeah.
And I'm the oldest, and I'll be 38 next month. And then I have two brothers who they're 30, almost 36, and then 33, and then my sister will be 28 in April. So pretty, we're all kind of scrunched together.
It's a nice even spread.
It was nice, not bad. Yeah, my parents just kept trying for a girl, and then the last one, my sister's the youngest and the girl, so they won. So
They won.
What was funny is my sister. They tried to have a girl, and then they ended up becoming like trans non-binary at the end. Like, so I don't know if they still didn't get their girl.
Oh, that's cute. No, that's it's funny.
You can't win them all.
Weston's the only one without a huge age gap between himself and the youngest. That's funny. I guess 10 years is pretty it's still a kind of big age gap because my sister and I are 11 years, but
it was the most like the biggest age gap moment we had was when I went to college and she was like 8, and I was like, she was still really young. But then it's like as we've gotten older, it's not as prominent.
yeah, yeah, me too, because I was 11 when my sister was born, and then but I stayed home for college for the first 2 years is the thing, because I went to community college. So it felt a little less weird because I just was at home, like I was in high school, but I'm in college. So, but now that I've moved out and I live alone, it is a little different. And she's the only one at home now because we actually have different fathers. My brother and I have the same dad, but she's got a different dad.
I will say this:
Um,
the only
oh yeah.
the only time I found it like to be problematic age gap was when we'd go out to eat at a restaurant, and the waiter or somebody would think that my sister was my daughter and I was with my mother. Like we were married. Oh, look at you! My mom thought it was great. She's like, man, I could like get this younger guy and stuff like that. And I'm like, hell yeah! And I'm just, oh god, this is embarrassing.
Oh no!
Yeah,
You're like, no, mom, no, no, thank you.
yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, getting back on track. Sorry about that. I like hearing about people's lives. Yeah, I think obviously being raised with siblings can be a challenge in some cases, but is also endearing. And I would say, as a someone who grew up with siblings and now has children, are any of your siblings Marxist, or are any of them quote unquote woke? Um, or have you talked to them about these kinds of things, or your childhood, and kind of connected those two?
Both my brothers are Bernie Bros, and then my sister's a libertarian. So it's very across the board.
My my youngest brother is a 6'7" kid, so he's still, he's I mean, I talk to him about he gets so mad when I call him a 6'7" kid.
A six
But
seven kid is hilarious.
just to me, anyone that's 10 years old or younger, you're a 6'7" kid. That's like what that generation is to me. Um, but no,
The alphas.
yeah. But no, I mean, he's fine. He's very, he's, I think he's too young to completely wrap his head around what Marxism is. But he is very, I mean, he knows I'm trans, of course, and I'm very open about myself and out and everything. Like to my family, he always every time he sees me and he's saying hi to me or bye to me, he'll say I'm the best trans sister ever, which is like the funniest thing. I love hearing it, but it's just like so silly. Um, my sister is very socially progressive, though I don't think she would like give herself any kind of political label. Um, she converted to Christianity quite recently, and she's kind of delving more into that. Uh, and whenever I'm talking to her about like stuff that's going on, I can tell it stresses her out. Like she doesn't always really want to worry herself with the things that are happening around the world, though she does care about them. So it's I wouldn't call it a point of contention. It's just it is a bit of a it is a point where we kind of have potential to butt heads sometimes because she's always been very metaphysical in her way of thinking, and I used to consider myself an agnostic, and the more and more I delved into like Marxism, I became, an atheist. And so it's just it's a spot where we can kind of talk to each other and respect each other's opinions, but like we just don't really see eye to eye on specific things. She's still pretty socially progressive, but she's not a Marxist by any means. And then both my parents, I would say, are like, social democrats, like Bernie Bros. I've had conversations with them about trying to trying to kind of yoink them a little bit further left, and every once in a while they tell me I'm too radical, uh, but I'm not going to give up on them just yet.
Yeah, totally heard that. Um, how is it? I did, Deirdre. I wanted to ask specifically for you. How is it being a trans parent, especially in these trying times for trans folks? I recently, just as everybody here knows, did an episode on the trans genocide that is currently happening here in the United States, but also I would argue internationally against trans people. As a trans person, what's your experience been with that?
um, I mean, it definitely hasn't been easy. Um, my child, I would say, is like one of the she she is so cool, and she is like one of the best one of the best fighters for trans rights in my inner circle. Um, while at like a friends gathering with like a a group of other friends a couple months ago, some of my other friends were just kind of like talking about trans people, and not in like a bad way. I'm trans. A couple of them are also trans. They were just kind of like talking about trans people existing. I wasn't there for the conversation. I was like in the bathroom or something, so I missed it. Um, but when I stepped out, they all started talking about how Raven was like getting ready to fight them because apparently she had interpreted what they were saying as like insulting in one way or another. And they, according to them, she looked at them and went, "What's the problem? You have a problem with trans
Oh,
people? What's the issue?" Like she like was getting ready to square up with them.
like one of
um,
those. Oh my God, that's so cute.
yeah. I don't know. I will say it does get so, because I'm completely out publicly with family at work, I use the women's restroom. I walk around with my daughter everywhere. She's with me about half the time, and because her other parent and I are divorced, and so when she's with me, it's just her and I. We're in the store, I'm walking around holding hands. She calls me mom in public. She hasn't called me dad in years. I take her into the women's restroom when she has to use the bathroom. I get stares every once in a while, but I haven't really had a whole lot in the way of like overt hatred or anything like that. The thing that's most upsetting to me is just not seeing anyone. I haven't seen one other person like me, and when I say that, I mean like not like I don't see other trans people where I am. I know where they are. I can see them. My gaydar is very good, but uh, since I've come out about 2 years ago, I haven't seen one other trans person with a little kid, like walking around with their child. Um, in the last 2 years. And that's the thing that freaks me out a lot is like, where are they? I know some of them are out there with children. I know they're raising kids. Um, like I have one of my best friends is a trans woman who, is raising a child, but like I don't see them out in the wild. Where are they? That's the scary thing is like how few of us there are.
Yeah, and I guess how few there are that feel comfortable being out and being parents because there is the you know part of the reason I went to ask is because we've been dealing with a lot of bigotry around trans folks, especially trans folks around kids. Um, a lot of bigoted people are people who are just ignorant and don't understand queerness and gender and all of these different concepts, um, or have a much more juvenile understanding of it. They view trans people as some kind of indoctrinator, as some kind of like agent of chaos. And I would say it's really admirable to know that you're out and still right and out as for yourself, but also out as like a transparent as well. Because that is I understand how hard that can probably be at times, as you talked about feeling very lonely.
Yeah, it is definitely lonely. I like to think that it's hopefully some sort of source of inspiration for like younger trans folks or even folks that are my age or older that don't have kids and maybe want to but think for whatever reason that they either don't deserve to raise children or it's you know not safe enough or whatever, like just that something to give them a glimmer of hope, like hey, like I saw like a trans mom with her kid today, like walking down Walmart, holding hands or whatever. Like I hope it's done some sort of good to inspire at least a couple people uh, out there.
Yeah, and John just said in the chat that there's a mom on Instagram who has a trans a wife that who's transitioned, and I think I've seen their content as well, and they have kids, and they're a really sweet couple, and you can tell that like even after she transitioned, it was certainly probably a difficult transition, but they seem very happy together.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, John, actually. Shifting gears, as as a grandparent, how was that experience, finding out that you were going to be a grandparent, and because you're, I mean, you already experienced being a parent, but how does it feel seeing your own child be a parent?
Okay, well, for starters, I was thinking it was going to be an April Fool's prank because they were telling me this like a little like 2 days before April Fool's Day. I'm like, this has got to be like the start of an elaborate prank, like because my ex is like telling me this shit and like, what are you talking to? Who? He's he's gonna be a father? No, no. It took me a while to like grasp it, and then once April 1st came and went, and they didn't tell me April Fools, I was like, oh shit, it's actually real, and that the same like wave of fear came over me as it did that time that I found out I was going to be a father. I don't know why, because like it's not my kid. It's just that same like, oh god, like, am I going to be a failure at this? Like, is he going to be a failure at this? And I know he's not. He's a brilliant kid. Like, I'm super proud of him. He's grown up to be such an amazing person, and so it was just it was surreal, and I think I was God. I don't even think I was like no, I was 40. Yeah, I just turned 40 not too long before time. So it was just like, man, am I like the youngest grandfather in the world now? Like, I was like, it can't be. I can't. That can't be it. But no. Once they came up and I got to meet his fiance and my grandson and everything like that, like I instantly fell in love. Like he's a nut. He was hilarious. Like just cracked me up the entire sweet kid. You know.
That's so sweet. And yeah, I think that that's, my mom was 21 when I was born, and my grandma was in her mid 40s, so I understand. I understand from the perspective of the grandchild. Um but yeah, I mean, taking it into a Marxist perspective, I think that it can be, like watching your child have a child and then go through that process that you went through. It's very dialectical. But I think that it's one of those things that did it change your perspective as a Marxist, or did it give you more perspective or less? Or how do you feel about that?
I guess it gave me more perspective because like he's gonna have to be fighting even harder now that like the contradictions of capitalism and the crises are just like even more just hardcore than they've ever been in the past, and just surviving in this chaos it's going to take wits and just like your principles about you. And like if I don't know what I would be doing right now if it wasn't for Marxism, and I just
I
want to pass
understand.
that on to him, and not repeat those mistakes that I repeated from my father and that he repeated from his. And just, I want to break these generational curses of like just dealing with it, just going through life, going through the motions, just there's more to life. Just seeing my grandson, just like that's the reason I stay in the struggle. uh, that moving feeling of love, just it
Yeah.
compels me to make sure that he's taken care of to the best of the best that I can take care of him. And
Yeah.
I know that there's a better world for that's out there for him. Just gotta fight for it.
Very true. Very well said. Yeah. And I would say I want to ask Weston now for as someone with two littles, because I feel like, you know, that experience of having two little ones who are one of them's brand new. What, 2 months is she 2 months old, Weston? Is that
Yeah, 2 months old. Yeah, she was born in December.
oh my goodness, what day?
Mm. The 26th. Sorry, kid. Yeah.
Oh my
So,
gosh, so she's brand new to the world.
yeah, right. And the day after Christmas. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing with them is because they're just starting out, I'm seeing everything as a bigger picture as, um, their education and their healthcare. I see where the struggles and I think the challenges will come for them, like when they're still children, and what me and my wife will have to fight for, and what they might have to fight for, just with the trends of um, where we're heading. Um, and working in education too, it gives me a good perspective because I see what the kids that are only just a few years older than them are going through, what the challenges they have with food security and school supplies and reliable transportation. And we're very fortunate where we're at, but even what we have to go through with the rising costs of everything, and um, worrying about where how much healthcare is going to be for all of us, because it's four of us now, so there's just everything's just so much more expensive. But um, I really think the biggest thing is just giving me I have a much bigger view of the world, um, how things work, and why things the way they are, and how can we deal with them that I didn't get growing up. And I'm hoping that, like that was said before, they can skip kind of the, what side are we on, get through the propaganda, get through um, the filth that I had to go through before I got to where I was. Because even, I didn't become a Marxist till my mid 30s. And it was after a lot of things happened to me where I was put in a position where there was no other choice. But, from what I learned and experienced and felt, there was no other choice for me but to become that, and to, study and grow in that. So I'm hoping that as they grow, they can see things differently, and they can make better decisions that I never did, um, as people, just because of how they were raised, and what they were told to lead with. So I just felt like, um, having our two daughters just put everything back into focus, into that, where I think maybe before that it was more, what I was dealing with growing up and becoming an adult and going through these stages. And now when you have kids, it's just everything zeroes in on them.
Right, exactly. And, as someone who does not have children, but I want children at some point, I think that, that was such an insightful answer on, understanding that experience of, you know, when you, it changes, from what I understand, it changes everything, when you bring a brand new life into this world. And, having to reframe around that experience, especially because in some cases it can be quite traumatic. Birth is not necessarily always a beautiful thing. I remember I knew a Mormon kid in high school who said he wanted like 9 kids, and he's like, "Birth is beautiful," and I'm like, "Yeah, because you don't have to fucking do it." But all right, um, and like that experience, the experiencing thing, like navigating things like the healthcare system. I did a film my sophomore year of college on reproductive care deserts in Denver. And, for a lot of people, they want to be excited about having a baby. They want to be excited about becoming a parent or bringing in another child into their family. But there is so much stress around just the basic stuff, you know, food, healthcare costs, housing. And that can really take a lot of the joy out of preparing to be a parent or preparing to become a parent of this new child and introduce them into your family. And, as Marxists, I think that the biggest thing that, and I would say, let me know what you guys think about this, is creating the concept of creating a community of care, especially as people bring their own children into the fold. What do you guys think about that concept as parents now?
Yeah, I think that's very important. The more the merrier, actually. Not to be the lib Hillary type, but yeah, I mean, it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah, it takes a community. We're all there to help each other out. Like I said, my son and his family live down in Texas. I'm up here in Colorado. He moved down back in 2018. Everybody just kind of moved off when they got older and stuff like that. I've been wanting them to come move up here for the longest time. I do not want my grandson to go to a Texas school. Uh, I will fight kicking and screaming for him not to go do that. And just having them know that there's somebody that has their back. Hey, I know that it works hard and stuff like that. Go out on a date. I got the kid or something like that. I'll watch the baby. Just being there for him, not expecting anything in return like that. It's like I said from the previous episode, building treasures in heaven. It's like, no, just play with your grandkid. You'll have fun, bond with them and stuff like that. I did that when they were up here a couple summers ago. Just like, go have fun, you guys. Here, have some money. Go on a date. I'll Alex. And I read some Lenin to him, and we've hung out with the cats, and had a great time.
Oh, that's so sweet. What about you, Deirdre?
What was the question again? I spaced out for like a second.
No, you're
I
good. You're good.
I didn't take my Adderall today.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
fine. No, you're good. I was talking about this concept of a community of care. You know what I mean? Like this,
Right.
because as parents, John just said, it takes a village to raise a child, but, and that's kind of the concept I was getting at. And, what your thoughts are, especially as a Marxist, that is, I think, very foundational to our ideology. But what do you feel about that?
I totally agree with it. I it it living in the United States makes getting help very, very difficult, and my personal situation also just doesn't help. With my my ex and I being separated, and my little one being with me about half the time. Like when she is with me, it's really just her and I. We live alone. And like the only income coming into the house is mine. And I don't have like another partner to help out, you know. So in some like ways I consider myself like a single mom just because of those specific aspects. And it is very tough, because when she's with me, everything that she needs falls on me to take care of. Um, and it can be very draining. Um, and it can make things more difficult than I would like them to be. And it would, and I have days where I find myself just sitting there like wishing I had some sort of team of people with me, even just like a roommate or something, so I could be like, hey, can you just stand here with her and keep her company so that I can like run to the store real quick and pick up laundry detergent, like without having to worry about like packing her up or doing this or doing that. Like just like really simple things. Because yeah, just doing everything with a 4-year-old attached to you takes about twice as long as it would have in the first place. Um, so there is some longing for that of like, man, like it, if the world was this way, it would obviously be easier because I would have more structural support instead of feeling like I'm by myself. And it just makes me angrier, unfortunately.
Yeah, most certainly. And it's also, I think that, yeah, I mean, I can only imagine being, like having to do like my life, but also with like a child attached to me, like 90% of the time, because it's hard. My mom, I watched her growing up, with a little one constantly because, I was 4 or 5 when my brother was born and I was 11 when my sister was born. So she's always had like a, a kid with her. And, that can be incredibly difficult, especially because my mom is a single mom. Like she's divorced twice, and like that experience is not an easy one. And so I can only imagine what it's like. And she's got a lot of help from her family on her side. She lives back over with them now, and she's got help over there. And even then, it can still be difficult at times. And now she's just got one kid at home rather than three. And so I think that um, kind of moving into this last segment, I wanted to talk about advice that you guys have as Marxist parents and things that you have learned that perhaps listeners can, take for themselves, and things that you would want to pass on, knowledge that you would want to pass on to others, and the experience that you've had. Is there anything particular that you would maybe want to point out or discuss?
Yeah,
I think a
absolutely.
big, oh,
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you can go ahead, Weston. I won't
Oh,
forget
okay.
it. I'm not going to space out
Okay.
again. You go first.
No worries. No, my big thing is that sometimes when you feel anger or frustration, not to direct it at yourself, but to direct it at the system and direct it at the people who are causing this to happen to you. I've shared with Deirdre before, but like I've at times I thought I was a bad provider and I thought I was a bad parent and I thought I was being a bad partner, but in reality it was just the constraints of the system when I was having a rough time in my life just made it worse. So I think to remember that and remember where to focus your frustration and your anger and make it positive so you don't, just hate yourself and you can use that and, as motivation to make stuff better, not only just using your kids, but just using your personal experiences too.
When my daughter was first born, my mom was already quite aware of like my ideology and the actions I had taken part in and the groups I may or may not have been involved with at one point or another. And she told me something along the lines of like, hey, um, you have to stop doing that stuff. Um, you're, not just living your life, you're living your child's life now. And for a point in time, I became very conflicted because I didn't want to, obviously, didn't want to do anything to put myself in unnecessary, in risk of unnecessary harm. Um, I don't want my kid losing her mom or anything like that, but it became quite difficult, this push and pull of trying to decide of like, well, do I stay home and just kind of watch the world continue on its trajectory and hope we'll be okay and not put myself in harm's way so that I can hopefully raise my kid and maybe it'll be all right? Or do I try to strategically and tactfully still contribute to the struggle, so that she has a shot at a better future? And I chose the latter. And as things get worse, I hope nothing bad happens to me. But I guess being involved in the kind of just communists don't historically do well in the United States, and so it's there's always that chance. um, but I already have other targets on my back anyway, so I decided might as well just might as well just continue the struggle, because if we don't, then there might not be a world for our children to grow up in.
Yeah, most certainly. John, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think with my situation with my son being a lot older and growing up and with his own family, a lot of it's just offering him advice, stuff that I should have known back in the day. Like here's the contradictions in this situation and stuff like that. Just I try to equip him with a better knowledge and understanding of, you know, how this world works with this capitalism bullshit that he's got to, you know, now deal with. Just I try to be there for him as much as I can. Uh, I know that like he's pretty level headed and stuff like that, but I still want to, you know, be that protective father. I'm like, hey, if you hear anything that sounds like this, like these are dog whistles, just kind of make sure that he's aware of, you know, fascism and the dangers of that and stuff like that, white supremacy. Because being down there in that region of Texas, it's very, very backwards, racist folk. You know, just it gets scary there at times. There's like Klan rallies and stuff in some of the towns out there, and I just want to make sure that he is safe and doesn't get caught up in that, you know, bad crowd, and sticks with anti-fascist Marxist-Leninists. So.
Most certainly. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of leaders in the past that we can look at that are in many ways model parents who have, you know, who dedicated their lives to the struggle, but also dedicated their lives to their children as well. And Verhoeven is one of those people that I think about. You know, one of the thinkers and the leaders of communism that, you know, the American Party of Labor that we look up to and that we quote and discuss as a genuine, you know, leader of the struggle, and especially the anti-revisionist struggle. And I think that, as you know, having talked to you guys, this panel of parents, people who have experienced and are experiencing raising children, you know, it's incredibly important to be aware of that struggle, you know, that internal struggle as well of raising someone into being an adult in a world which is so divided and chaotic, and especially in a world where the mode of production is so counterintuitive to those of what people actually require and what we, you know, what society requires to survive. And so, you know, I think that it's to be a parent is one of the most radical things that you can do, and to be a parent who is so involved with your children and so invested in making their lives a good one, even in the face of growing fascism, is so inspirational for the rest of us who, you know, look towards a future in which we may be able to be parents someday. And so I think that it can be very hard to be a communist in these days at times because of just how reactionary the masses can be, you know, or at least certain fractions of the masses. But it's always important to remember that, you know, we can change things for the better. And a lot of those changes start in the home domestically with your own people, you know, the people that you see every day, that you experience life with every day. And, you know, in the case of the folks here today, it's their children. You know, being a parent is not an easy thing. And especially in the discussion around having a community of care, I think it is so incredibly important to push that messaging, to show other parents that they are not alone in the struggle. And so, yeah, I think my last big question for you guys for the night is, what do you hope for in the future for your children? And is there anything specific that you are fighting for them? You know, anything that you know, this is a very broad question, so anything you want to touch on, and your answer is perfectly fine.
all my life, I was told about the American dream: work hard, do good in school, and you'll you'll get the world, pretty much. Uh, I'm in my mid 40s now, and that's bullshit. It's not out there. If you're lucky, it can be out there, but it's not for everybody. Uh, I want to make sure that my grandson, I don't want my son to struggle as bad as I've had to growing up. I know it's inevitable right now, but I fight that, my grandson and others kids, don't have to grow up in a world that we had to grow up, like wondering where our next meal is going to be, getting being scared to go to sleep because uh, the cops are outside, harassing the neighbors and they're being loud. It's just, it's scaring you. Stuff like that. The world is a scary ass place, and it's just getting more scarier and more extreme. And just, I don't, I don't want him to live in that world. There's something better, and I'm gonna fight for it. Damn it.
I guess my big concern is just the their future of uh, reproductive rights and women's rights, and just seeing the backsliding going on. I'm really concerned about that, and access to education. Um, that's just a big focus for me, like probably like professionally and personally. So um, I just am scared that they'll have less they'll have less than my wife has, and then my wife probably has less than her mom has. So just fighting to reverse that, and um, make a world where it's equal and they can succeed, um, no matter what they choose to do or to be, or anything like that. Those are just my big concerns right now.
It gets pretty difficult sometimes to, hold on to hope for, some sort of like revolutionary moment where things can actually be overturned and we can start like, building some sort of better world. Uh, I hope that at the very least, if that moment doesn't come for, me and like, or us anytime soon, that at the very least, the things I do, the things we do contribute um, to the movement so that kids that are growing up now at least have an easier shot at, making that attempt themselves. Um, I always feel a little guilty uh, bringing a kid into the world, as it is, and I remember, I mean, I used to, I don't feel that guilt anymore. But a comrade of mine who's not in the party is just uh, someone I've, known and organized with on and off for years told me when I told him about that. And I can't remember if this was a quote that he got from somewhere, if this was something he thought of on his own. So I'm not going to credit it properly, but he told me, you should never, what did he say? Never feel guilt for raising dragon slayers in a world of dragons. So I like to remind myself of that.
That's a really great way of putting it. I love that. Raising dragon slayers in a world full of dragons. Yeah, and I think that that's, as we come to the end of recording here, I think that, keeping our revolutionary optimism and remembering that there is a better world to fight for is so incredibly important. And I appreciate, everybody here coming in tonight and discussing this, especially because I think it's really hard for sometimes for Marxists. It can be really easy to become doomer pilled and just think that, the bourgeois class is going to win and we're going to live in a new semi-feudal system of like um, insanity that is going to oppress everyone and be terrible. But we have to remember that that doesn't have to be the reality that we live in, and there is a better world worth fighting for. Um, and I think that this was such a fun conversation, and I'm so glad that we got to do this, especially because once again, I think that You know, a lot of people want, you know, they want a world where they can raise their own families and they can, you know, experience that joy. And it can be really hard to see a world where that becomes a possibility, but it's always remembering, as I said, revolutionary optimism is one of the most important things that you can maintain as a Marxist-Leninist. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on tonight and discussing this. This was such a fun conversation, and I look forward to having you all back on the show at some point.
Can I tell just a very brief story? Something
Yeah,
that I find very inspirational about something with my little one.
sure.
So I since she's, you know, when she's with me, it's just her and I. Usually, if I have some sort of meeting or something I have to go to, um, I have to drag her along with me, and she doesn't usually like it, but she does a good job at, you know, trying to occupy herself, and I do what I can to give her things to help keep her entertained. But I'm also a member of the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, and I want to say this was about a year ago. Uh, I was I was at a meeting at like the building that we usually use. It was more packed this time. I think there was about 100 people at this particular one, and I we had it was like also like a potluck type of thing, and there's like a bunch of food there and like a side kitchen, and I decided to get up and drag her along with me to go and get more food. And as we're in the kind of side kitchen area, she starts tugging at my arm and pointing to the main room where all of the people are. And I look down, I'm like, what's the matter, honey? What's wrong? And she looks up at me and she says, Mom, we have to get back to the working class. And I absolutely love that.
Oh, that is precious. I love that. We
So
do.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on me at some point.
Mom, we have to get back to the working class. That is so real. What a that you know, no one's ever kept it that real before.
Hey, I'm gonna ask her, hey, why did you say that? Why did you say that?
Because we were missing it.
We were missing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't miss the revolution. Well, that's I think a perfect way to end this off. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm gonna go ahead and uh,